Their chance of developing a respiratory tract infection was 2.7 times lower than the group of people that had their vitamin D levels below 38 nanograms per milliliter. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10 reasons you need to take vitamin D. But before I start, you guys know the drill. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, ding, ding, ding. And if you don't want to watch the entire video, I will be including timestamps in the description so you can skip ahead to the section that you want. Now, onto the topic at hand. Vitamin D, also called the sunshine vitamin, has several important functions, including the absorption of calcium and phosphorus, and also maintaining a healthy immune system. So that's why for today, I decided to share with you the top 10 reasons why you should take vitamin D. The number one reason why you should take vitamin D is a no-brainer. It's because you're deficient in vitamin D. Now, with regard to vitamin D, if you are going to take vitamin D as a supplement, ideally you would want to get your blood levels checked to see exactly what your levels are at. Now, with regard to vitamin D, the blood test that you are going to get is a serum 25-hydroxy vitamin D test. And with regard to your levels, ideally the optimal range for vitamin D should be between 80 to 120 nanograms per milliliter. If you have normal vitamin D levels, that is going to be between 50 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. Insufficient vitamin D is going to be classified as 30 to 50 nanograms per milliliter. And if you are below 30 nanograms per milliliter, this is going to be considered deficient, and you should definitely consider supplementing with vitamin D. Now, the number two reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that you spend a lot of time indoors. As I stated earlier, vitamin D is also known as the sunshine vitamin. And one of the reasons why it is called the sunshine vitamin is because our body synthesizes vitamin D3 from solar rays. Basically, when sun makes contact with our skin, our body is going to synthesize vitamin D3 in the form of cholecalciferol. That cholecalciferol is going to be converted by the liver into calcitriol, which is going to be converted into calcitriol in the kidneys as the active form of vitamin D. So if you are spending a lot of time indoors and you're not getting very much sunlight, then you definitely would want to consider supplementing with vitamin D, as you're not going to be synthesizing as much vitamin D because of the lack of sun exposure. The number three reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that you live in a cold climate. This kind of goes back into the spending a lot of time indoors. Typically, most people, when it is very cold outside, they tend to spend more time indoors. And when they do go outside, they are fully clothed. So if you do live somewhere where it is very, very cold all year round, or during times of the year where it is very, very cold, if you are constantly indoors, or when you are outdoors, you are constantly covered up, then you are not going to be getting that much sun exposure. And because you're not going to be exposed to that much sun, then you are going to have lower concentrations of 25-hydroxy vitamin D in your system. So it would be beneficial to supplement with vitamin D. The number four reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that it's flu season. Guess what? Between the months of October to March, flu season is at its peak, and that is when rates of influenza are at their highest. Just one of the reasons why influenza is at its peak during these months is because, again, most people are going to be deficient in vitamin D during these months. Their levels are going to be significantly lower than during summer months when they are outside. And one of the reasons, aside from just being indoors more and also being fully clothed, in the wintertime, the sun is going to be a little bit farther away from the earth. So because the sun is farther away, that means the solar rays have a longer distance to travel. And because they have a longer distance to travel, that means the solar rays are going to be a lot weaker. So because they are a lot weaker, even if you do get sun exposure in the wintertime, it is not going to be as strong, and you are not going to synthesize as much vitamin D than you would have had you had been outside in the summertime. And when serum 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels are low, it has been shown to have negative correlation with regard to adverse symptoms with regard to getting influenza. So if you would like to protect yourself during the flu season, incorporating vitamin D supplementation would be of benefit to you, as it will help to reduce symptomology. It doesn't mean that you can avoid the flu whatsoever. You can still get the flu and you can still suffer some adverse effects, but it will greatly diminish the probability of you suffering those adverse symptoms. Now, the number five reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that you have dark skin. Basically, the darker your skin color, the more vitamin D you are going to need, because you are going to be absorbing less vitamin D. The lighter skin you are, the easier it is going to be for you to absorb vitamin D. There was a study done in Utah where they took roughly 200 people, I believe it was 198 participants, and they separated them by gender and also by skin pigmentation. And what they found across the board, women and men, their vitamin D levels were relatively similar. It was only off by about 2 nanograms per milliliter. The women across the board were higher than the men. But when it came to skin pigmentation, this is where there was drastic differences in the levels of 25-hydroxy vitamin D. With regard to the skin pigmentation, they categorized 3 different groups of people. They had light skin pigmentation, intermediate skin pigmentation, and also dark skin pigmentation. And what they found was when they did 4 bloods drawn over the course of November to January, the group of people with light skin pigmentation, they had vitamin D levels of 30.7 nanograms per milliliter. The people with intermediate skin pigmentation, they had 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels of 22 nanograms per milliliter, so significantly lower. Now, when we got to the group of dark skin pigmentation, their vitamin D levels dropped all the way down to 15.8 nanograms per milliliter. So the difference between the light skin pigmentation group and the dark skin pigmentation group was almost a 50% drop off. So if you are somebody that has very, very dark skin, then it would be beneficial for you to supplement with vitamin D, because most people that do have darker skin tones, they do happen to have lower levels of serum 25-hydroxy vitamin D. The number 6 reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is because you are obese. With regard to obesity, several scientific studies have shown the negative correlation between your BMI and your 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels. There have been multiple studies that shown that there is an inverse correlation between BMI and serum 25-hydroxy vitamin D. So basically, the higher your BMI, the lower your serum vitamin D levels are going to be. Now, BMI, if you followed any of my other videos, you know that I'm not a big fan of the metric of BMI because it is just not very accurate at determining overweight or obesity. But regardless of whether or not the BMI is an accurate reflection of whether you are overweight or not, the data does suggest that if you do have a high BMI and you are overweight, you are going to have lower levels of vitamin D. One of the reasons that has been postulated is because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So if you have more fat, the vitamin D, it's going to be stored in your fat cells rather than circulating throughout your blood. So if you do have a lot of fat mass, then what's going to happen is you are going to store most of your vitamin D in your fat cells, and it's not going to be circulating throughout your system. So by losing weight or by incorporating some form of oral vitamin D, it would be of great benefit if you are someone who is severely obese. The number 7 reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that you are pregnant. With regard to pregnancy, higher doses of vitamin D have been shown to lead to less complications during pregnancy. Things like gestational diabetes, preterm birth, and also in rates of infection. Now, one of the things, there was this study done on a large group of women, and they found that the women who were given a dose of 4,000 IU of vitamin D, when it came to monitoring their blood work, there was no harm whatsoever. They developed no symptoms with regard to overdosing of vitamin D. And not only that, but they found that there was a decreased risk in health complications with regard to these pregnant women. In fact, it wasn't a small risk. They cut their risk down all the way in half by consuming a dose of 4,000 IU per day. Now, obviously, you would want to get your blood levels checked, see where exactly you're at. If you are deficient, you would want to supplement with it. But one of the things worth noting with this study, at the time that this study was completed, the recommended dose was 400 IU. So the dose that they were giving them, 4,000 IU per day, was 10 times higher than what was the recommended daily dose at the time. And this shows that even at a dose of 4,000 IU, for the women in this study, there was no harm to the baby and there was no harm to the woman. And not only was there no harm, but it was very beneficial because it did cut their risk in half. Now, the number 8 reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that you are elderly. If you are an elderly person, vitamin D has been shown to have a positive impact on your bone health. If you are deficient in vitamin D, what's going to happen is if you are 65 or older, this is going to increase your chance of developing osteoporosis, and also it is going to increase your chance of hip fractures. What this study found was the group of 65-plus-year-old people that took vitamin D, they reduced their chance of developing a hip fracture, and not only did they reduce their risk of developing a hip fracture, but it also improved some of their other markers, things like their cardiovascular health, reduced risk of developing things like cancer, and also improving their immune system. So if you are somebody who is elderly, then incorporating vitamin D into your supplement protocol would be beneficial. The number 9 reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that it is going to reduce your chance of developing an infection. There have been multiple studies that shown the correlation correlation between higher levels of vitamin D and lower rates of infection. Just one study, this also came out of the Utah study that I mentioned earlier, and there were 198 participants, and what they found in this one particular study was people that had adequate amounts of vitamin D, and what they defined as adequate in this study was above 38 nanograms per milliliter. Their chance of developing a respiratory tract infection was 2.7 times lower than the group of people that had their vitamin D levels below 38 nanograms per milliliter. So if you do incorporate vitamin D into your supplement protocol, this can reduce the risk of you developing a respiratory tract infection. The number 10 reason why you should supplement with vitamin D is that it is also going to reduce the amount of days that you are sick. This comes from the exact same study, and what they found was with the group of people that had vitamin D levels above 38 nanograms per milliliter, the chance of them being sick and missing days of work was 4.9 times lower than the group that had serum 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels below 38 nanograms per milliliter. So if you would like to improve your immune function, if you would like to reduce your risk of developing things like respiratory tract infections, if you would like to reduce your risk of developing things like hip fractures, and if you would like to reduce the amount of days that you would like to be sick, then supplementing with vitamin D may be a beneficial avenue for you to go on. But again, you don't want to go in blindly. You would want to go and get your serum 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels checked. Go ahead, go to your doctor, measure your levels. If you are below 30 nanograms per milliliter, that is considered deficient. It is definitely worth supplementing if your levels are that low. Ideally, the optimal range would be 80 to 100 nanograms per milliliter. And when it comes to protecting yourself against developing issues with influenza, things like respiratory tract infections or also missing days due to illness, then above 38 nanograms per milliliter has been shown clinically to have a beneficial effect on your chance of developing respiratory tract infections and missing days due to work. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.